In the freezing wilderness, the cowboy was losing strength as the snow cut into his skin like knives and the silence felt heavier than the storm itself. He had walked for hours with a wounded leg, his coat soaked, his hands numb, and his vision slowly fading. His breath was slowing, each one weaker than the last, and death felt closer than morning that he told himself to stay awake. But the cold whispered sleep like a promise he could not fight anymore. Just when his knees gave out, shadows appeared. Through the snow point, two Apache sisters stood there, watching him with sharp eyes and guarded hearts. They knew what the cold could do. They knew what would happen if he slept alone. His body trembled as darkness closed in. Then the two Apache sisters said something that stopped his heart. Not with anger, not with fear, but with words that meant survival, warmth, and a choice that would change all of them before the night was over. The story follows a lone cowboy caught in a deadly winter storm that showed no mercy and no escape. The wind screamed across the empty land as snow buried every trail behind him. He was injured, exhausted, and far from any shelter, carrying pain in his leg and fear in his chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, and his strength was fading faster than hoped. He had no weapon, no fire, and no one searching for him. That same night, not far away, two Apache sisters were hiding from danger, silent and alert, listening to the storm and the world beyond it. They were running from threats that followed them through the land, trusting no one and surviving on instinct. Fate led him to two Apache sisters hiding from danger, bringing three broken paths together in one frozen night that would change their lives forever. The sisters did not trust outsiders, especially a cowboy, and the moment their eyes met him in the storm, their hands tightened with caution as years of fear spoke louder than sympathy. The wind pushed harder, wrapping all three in biting cold that burned the skin and stole breath without warning. The cowboy tried to stand straight, but his injured leg failed him, forcing him to lean forward as shame and weakness crossed his face. He knew one wrong move could make them disappear into the snow, leaving him alone with the night. The sisters exchanged a silent look, one filled with memory and warning, because men like him had brought pain before, and survival had taught them never to hesitate. The cold grew stronger with every passing minute, creeping into bones, numbing fingers, slowing thought, turning time into an enemy that showed no mercy. Snow gathered in the cowboy's hair and lashes as his vision blurred, and the sound of the storm became distant, as if the world itself was moving away from him. The sisters noticed the change, the way his shoulders dropped, the way his breathing lost rhythm, the way fear replaced pride in his eyes. The cowboy's body began to shut down as fear filled the air, not fear of them, but fear of falling asleep and never waking again. That he tried to speak, but his voice cracked into silence, stolen by the wind and the cold. The sisters stepped closer, still careful, still ready to run, but close enough to see the truth written on his face. This was not a threat. This was a man at the edge of death. The older sister watched his hands tremble uncontrollably, knowing that the cold had already taken too much, while the younger sister listened to his breathing grow shallow and uneven. The storm roared louder, erasing all other sounds, trapping them in a moment that demanded a choice. They could walk away and survive as they always had, or they could risk everything on a stranger whose life was slipping through the night. The cowboy swayed again, his knees bending, and this time the sisters moved, not out of trust, but out of instinct, catching his weight before it hit the frozen ground. The contact shocked all of them, human warmth cutting through the cold like fire under ice. The cowboy froze in place, unsure whether to pull back or surrender, while the sisters felt how light he had become, how close he was to disappearing. The cold pressed harder, forcing urgency into every breath and decision. The sisters knew the night would not wait, and hesitation could kill them all. As the storm closed in tighter, trust did not arrive easily, but necessity spoke louder than fear, and in that frozen moment, survival became the only language they could all understand. The sisters felt the truth settle heavy between them as the storm tightened its grip, because they could sense the moment slipping away and knew he would not survive the night if nothing changed. The cowboy's shivering turned weak and uneven, his body no longer fighting with strength, but surrendering inch by inch to the cold. They dragged him toward a narrow rock shelter carved by time, their movements quick yet careful, hearts racing with fear and resolve. They built a small fire with trembling hands, shielding the flame from the wind, watching it struggle as if mirroring his fading life. Fire was not enough, because the heat vanished into the storm before it could reach his bones. They wrapped him in blankets pulled from their packs, thick and worn from many journeys. But the cold crept through them like water through cracks. Blankets were not enough, because his skin felt distant and his breathing shallow. The sisters exchanged a look filled with dread, knowing they had reached the final choice they had tried to avoid. They had learned from elders and harsh winters that sometimes survival demanded closeness, not comfort, courage instead of fear. Love, warmth, and courage became the only solution left standing against the night. The older sister moved first, steady and calm, removing her outer layer and sitting beside him, pressing her warmth against his frozen side. The younger sister followed without words, fear shaking her hands, but determination guiding her heart. The cowboy's eyes fluttered open in confusion, shame crossing his face. But he was too weak to protest, too close to the edge to resist. They spoke softly, firm and clear, telling him to stay awake, to breathe, to hold on, while the storm screamed around them like a living thing. Human warmth slowly replaced the violent cold, not quickly, not gently, but enough to keep his heart fighting. His breathing began to steady, shallow fear easing into fragile trust as his body felt life again inch by inch. The sisters stayed alert, listening to every change in his breath, every shift of the fire, every sound beyond the shelter. The night stretched long and merciless, testing their strength, their will, their belief in doing what was right even when it felt dangerous. Time lost meaning as snow piled higher and the wind refused to rest. The cowboy drifted in and out of awareness, hearing voices like anchors pulling him back from darkness. Feeling warmth that kept him tethered to life, the sisters ignored the cold biting into their own skin, sharing what little heat they had without regret. Because survival was never meant to be selfish, as the storm raged on, fear slowly loosened its hold, replaced by something quiet and powerful. The understanding that sometimes strangers are brought together for a reason written by fate itself. The words came quietly but carried the weight of the night when the sisters told him he was sleeping between them, and the meaning struck deeper than the storm outside. Their voices were steady, leaving no space for argument, because time was no longer something they could afford. The cowboy tried to lift his head, confusion filling his eyes, pride struggling to rise, but his body refused to obey, weakened beyond choice. That it was not desire, but survival, and the sisters made that clear through their calm focus and controlled movements as they positioned him carefully, guarding his injured leg and fragile breath. One decision stood between life and death, and hesitation would steal what little chance remained. The fire crackled low, throwing weak light across tired faces, while the wind clawed at the shelter as if trying to pull them apart. The cowboy's heart pounded with shame and fear, yet beneath it lived a growing sense of safety he had not felt in years. The sisters stayed alert, their backs straight, senses sharp, knowing the danger was not over simply because warmth had returned. His breathing slowly found rhythm, each breath less painful than the last, each moment proof that the choice had been right. The storm pressed on, hours stretching long and cruel. But inside the shelter something fragile endured. The cowboy drifted between waking and sleep, catching fragments of whispered words meant to keep him present, reminders to breathe, to hold on, to stay alive. The sisters did not close their eyes, taking turns watching the fire and listening to the storm, protecting a man they still did not fully trust but refused to abandon. The cold tested their resolve, biting at exposed skin, numbing muscles, demanding sacrifice with every minute that passed. They answered it with silence and endurance, sharing warmth without hesitation, courage steady in their chests. The cowboy felt the change before he understood it, the return of feeling to his hands, the strength slowly creeping back into his limbs, life refusing to let go. He realized then that survival had a cost, and tonight that cost was pride. The sisters remained focused, knowing dawn was still far away and danger lingered in every shadow beyond the firelight. The storm eased slightly, but the cold stayed ruthless, reminding them that one mistake could undo everything. That as time moved forward, fear softened into a fragile calm, trust forming not through words but through shared endurance. The night no longer felt endless, only difficult. And that difference mattered as the wind began to lose its anger. The cowboy stayed conscious, grounded by warmth and quiet strength, understanding that this moment would follow him forever. Because when the night demanded a choice, strangers became lifelines, and survival became something shared. The night passed slowly as the storm howled outside, its voice rising and falling like a restless creature, while inside the shelter time seemed to stretch and breathe with them. The fire burned low but steady, enough to paint moving shadows across stone and tired faces, enough to remind them that life still held on. Fear softened into trust without anyone noticing the moment it happened, because it arrived quietly, carried by shared warmth and steady breathing. The cowboy no longer shook the same way, his body learning the rhythm of safety, his breath deepening as strength returned piece by piece. He stayed awake, not because he was told to, but because he felt anchored by the presence beside him, by the calm resolve that surrounded him like a shield. The sisters relaxed their guarded posture little by little, muscles easing as the night lost its sharpest edge. Though their awareness never fully faded, they listened to the wind together, not as enemies of it, but as survivors who understood its language and its limits. Silence filled the shelter in a way that felt complete rather than empty, broken only by the soft crackle of embers and the steady sound of breathing. Three strangers felt connected by fate and silence, a bond formed without names or promises, shaped only by endurance and choice. The cowboy sensed the weight of what had been given to him, warmth that came with no demand, help offered without question, and it humbled him more than any wound. The sisters felt it too, a quiet confirmation that compassion did not weaken them, that strength could exist without armor or distance. The storm continued its assault beyond the rocks, but it no longer felt personal, no longer felt like a sentence waiting to be carried out. Inside, the night became something else, a space where humanity replaced fear, where survival was shared instead of guarded. Hours moved forward unnoticed as the fire slowly faded and the cold crept closer again, yet the warmth between them remained enough, held by stillness and resolve. The cowboy's thoughts drifted, not toward sleep, but toward understanding, toward the realization that this night would live with him long after the snow melted. The sisters remained alert, eyes occasionally meeting, reading the same unspoken truth in each other, that this stranger would live, and that mattered. When the wind finally softened, when the storm began to lose its strength, none of them spoke, because words felt unnecessary. The quiet held everything that needed to be said: respect, gratitude, and a fragile trust shaped by hardship. The darkness slowly thinned, and the promise of morning crept closer. Three lives rested in the same small space, changed not by grand gestures, but by warmth shared when the night demanded it most. Light slowly pushed through the cracks of the shelter as the storm finally loosened its grip, and the cold that had ruled the night began to retreat inch by inch. The cowboy woke up alive, not with sudden movement, but with awareness returning gently, breath steady, body heavy yet present, pain sharp but manageable. He opened his eyes to the quiet glow of morning and understood before anything else that he had been given another chance. The sisters watched the sunrise with tired eyes, their faces marked by exhaustion and resolve, knowing they had held the line against the night without breaking. The fire had faded into ash, but the warmth they had shared lingered, woven into the still air between them. Snow outside reflected pale light across the land, transforming the world from threat to witness. The cowboy shifted carefully, testing his strength, feeling life respond where there had been none, and emotion tightened his chest stronger than pain. He met their gaze without words, gratitude clear, respect steady, because language felt too small for what had passed. The sisters rose slowly, stretching stiff muscles, stepping toward the opening as dawn revealed a quiet land reborn under white silence. Something had changed forever inside all of them, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, settling where fear once lived. The cowboy understood he would never walk the world the same way again, carrying the weight of survival earned through kindness rather than force. The sisters felt it, too, a quiet confirmation that courage could take many forms, and compassion could stand beside strength without diminishing it. They gathered their things with calm movements, the urgency of night replaced by deliberate purpose, knowing danger still existed but no longer ruled the moment. The cowboy pulled himself upright with effort, leaning against stone, breathing in the cold air that no longer felt like an enemy. The sun climbed higher, revealing tracks buried by snow, erasing proof of the struggle as if the land chose to keep the secret for them. No one spoke, because the silence felt earned, filled with meaning that did not need sound. The sisters stepped outside first, scanning the horizon out of habit, then pausing to let the morning settle into their bones. The cowboy followed slowly, standing beneath the open sky. Feeling small and grounded at once, he nodded once, a simple gesture heavy with promise. Knowing respect would guide his steps from this point forward, the sisters returned the nod, their expressions steady, neither distant nor inviting, but honest. They turned toward their path without hesitation, moving with the quiet confidence of survivors who trusted themselves. The cowboy watched them go, committing the moment to memory, not as a debt to repay, but as a truth to carry. As the sun rose fully, warming the frozen land, the night released its hold completely, leaving behind 3 lives forever shaped by a single choice made when darkness demanded everything. The cowboy left with respect, not words, stepping away as the morning light followed him across the silent land, carrying gratitude heavier than any promise. The sisters returned to their world, forever remembered, their figures fading into the open horizon yet fixed permanently in his heart. He did not look back out of weakness, but out of understanding, knowing some moments are meant to live untouched by questions. That night had taken fear, pride, and distance, replacing them with a truth he would carry for life. The storm had tried to claim him, but humanity stood in its way and refused to move forward. The sisters walked on with quiet strength, unchanged on the surface, yet deeper within. Something steady had taken root. The cowboy moved ahead with slower steps and clearer purpose, shaped by warmth given without condition. That night proved one truth. Humanity saves lives, not through power or force, but through courage shared in silence when survival demands everything.